Welcome everybody. Let me give you an introduction to Hyperledger, and thank you for joining this first meetup in Tbilisi. I hope that the weather is nice and that you're enjoying your time. My name is Marta Pikarska. I'm Director of Ecosystem for Hyperledger. And my role in Hyperledger is to facilitate interactions with our members, introduce our members to each other, and help everybody understand the ecosystem, because it is quite complicated, I know that, and there are a lot of projects, so we will talk about it in a second. So let's start with what Hyperledger is. Actually a quiz for you. Who thinks that Hyperledger is an IBM project? You can raise your hands. Okay, yeah, good. At least 2 people, that's cool. So we are not a IBM project. We are a collaborative global open source software community that is hosted by the Linux Foundation. What this means is that about 3 years ago, Linux Foundation was asked by about 30 enterprise members. Among them were IBM and Hitachi, Fujitsu, Intel, digital assets, were asked what do they want to do with blockchain, because blockchain was booming 3 years ago. And that's why Hyperledger started. It started as an answer to what enterprises wanted in terms of blockchain. So Hyperledger is 100% open source. It doesn't belong to anybody. Anybody can download the code, anybody can engage with any kind of technical background. We are not pay to play, so you don't have to be a member to get any access, or our members are not treated in any special way when it comes to technology. And we have a very collaborative software development approach, which means that we have very big transparency and longevity that allows us to bring blockchain forward to commercial adoption. Anybody, as I said, is welcome to engage on a technical level, and I'll tell you a bit more how to do it. But just to be sure that you understand, when companies advertise Hyperledger solutions, they're using that same open source code that any of you can here download. And they might host it, they might deploy solutions on top of it, but it's not like they own it in any way. So what is Linux Foundation? Because I mentioned Linux Foundation, and it's probably worth explaining what is Linux Foundation. Linux Foundation was started 20 years ago with an answer to what would happen if Linus Torvalds gets hit by a bus or dies very rapidly. Because there were a lot of people that were contributing to Linux core code, but they were not really governed in any way. They didn't have a place where they could gather together, even online, and talk about things and so on. It was kind of all volunteer and very distributed, and all kind of centered around Linus Torvalds. So we created a Linux Foundation that is dedicated to building a sustainable ecosystem around open source projects. And this means that today, Linux Foundation has over 150 different projects. It's pretty incredible if you think about it, that that many different projects exist. And they all focus on a slightly different part of the industry. So there is one focused on energy, there is one focused on, that is LF Linux. You have Node.js, which is the Linux Foundation kind of platform for developing Node. We have cloud native computing that hosts Kubernetes. I'm sure, how many of you heard about Kubernetes? Yeah, okay, so good. So you've heard about some of those projects. LF networking is a very big one when you're in telecom space. And Hyperledger is among those projects, right? And it's very interesting if you compare the number of blockchain projects that have been launched since 2016 with the number of GitHub repositories or GitHub projects in GitHub repository. And you can see a very similar kind of curve of growth of how many projects were there and how many blockchain projects, because blockchain is all about open source. It doesn't really exist without open source. But also, of course, it is a bit like this cartoon, and it has been for quite a while. You know, I think that we should build a blockchain. What color should the blockchain be? I think, blue would be great, because that's really how people think about blockchain. It's this magical thing that exists somewhere in the space. But today, 3 years after Hyperledger was started, where we started really investing in the space, we see that there's a division between permissionless networks and public and private networks. And these are not the same things. Because permissioning is about who can write to a blockchain, so who has access to the network for right reasons. While public versus private is who can read, who has the visibility into what happens on a blockchain. And because these are kind of not parallel things, they are perpendicular in a way, you have basically 4 types of blockchain technologies. Permissionless public, which is your Bitcoin, your Ethereum network, the cryptocurrencies. And it makes sense, because when you have a cryptocurrency, you want everybody to be able to access that network, spend money, transact with it, and everybody to observe what transactions happen. The bigger the adoption, the better. On the other hand, if you think about things like medical records or healthcare industry, which I like to bring up because it's very intuitive, you don't want anybody to be able to access information about your health. Probably you only want to read the data and maybe give access to your doctors, sometimes your family, but that's it. On the other hand, of course, only legitimate doctors and nurses should be able to upload information about your health, right? Those who actually did do some tests on you or had meetings with you. And that's why permissioned private network is very good for those reasons, right? I think that kind of makes sense. And then there is permissioned public network, which I really like, and I think this is one of the biggest adoptions of blockchain is in permissioned public networks, because they are basically mimic the way that we today interact, which is we have institutions like the certification bodies or universities or governments that issue you some claims, some certifications, right? They give you permission to drive, or they give you permission to or prove that you're a citizen of Georgia. On the other hand, anybody should be able to verify that you are a citizen of Georgia or that you have the PhD in computer science or anything like that, right? So this is why permissioned public networks make a lot of sense. And then there's permissionless private, which are not very popular, of course. So Hyperledger momentum and what Hyperledger does is we focus on anything that is not permissionless public, right? So anything on the right side of that slide is what Hyperledger frameworks and tools are all about. They can be permissioned public, they can be permissioned private, it doesn't matter that much. So we launched 3 years ago. Today we have over 270 members, so a pretty big number. We actually have more than, this slide is, I should have corrected it, because currently we actually have 14 different projects under our umbrella. So we have tools and frameworks, and we're trying to define what are tools, what are frameworks, so we have 14 different code bases. We also have something that's called Hyperledger Labs that allows you to incubate projects. So if you have a project that comes from a hackathon and you want the community to continue developing it and you're excited about sharing it with others, you can submit your code to Hyperledger Labs as this kind of experimentation R&D field. And we have 12 active community working groups and special interest groups, which I'll tell about in a second, because I love your participation here. So this is our umbrella, and I know it seems very complicated and confusing, but these projects and frameworks are kind of are differentiated by the programming language which they use, the consensus mechanism that is applicable to them, approach to smart contracts, and governance model. So Hyperledger Borrow is our Ethereum virtual machine that runs on top of Tendermint. So it's basically the first Apache licensed, fully open source Ethereum virtual machine, and Tendermint is the protocol of choice. And Borrow actually connects to both Fabric and Sawtooth, allowing Fabric and Sawtooth to use Solidity smart contracts. Hyperledger Fabric is probably our oldest, for sure is our oldest and most mature project. This one has interesting things like pluggable consensus, so you can exchange the consensus depending on your network. It has permissioned channels, so it's really focused on the business side of things and kind of consortium style network. And it's written in Go. It supports other languages, but it's mostly written in Go. And it supports both Solidity and chain code, its native smart contract language. Hyperledger Sawtooth, to talk about a more kind of mature project, is the other one that is in the production version. And this one supports Solidity smart contracts and uses a very interesting consensus mechanism that is called POET, Proof of Elapsed Time. And as I mentioned, it also has a pluggable consensus mechanism, which is something very interesting. It's very flexible, I would say very good to scale. So if you have, while Fabric is great when you need privacy and kind of more closed settings like between banks, Sawtooth is great when you need a scale, when you need to have many participants, many nodes, many networks, you kind of need the trust network. Hyperledger Indy is our identity project. How many of you have heard about Sovereign? Nobody? Sovereign Foundation? Okay, so Sovereign Foundation is one that has very interesting deployments on identity. They are focused on zero-knowledge proofs and verifiable claims for self-sovereign identity. And that's what Hyperledger Indy is. It's a project that came from them, and we are kind of hosting the framework while they are deploying the biggest network. So you can deploy your own Hyperledger Indy, or you can use the one that is from Sovereign. Hyperledger Iroha is focused on mobile applications, so you have iOS and Android SDKs for Iroha, and you can run full SPV proofs on phones. You can't yet run nodes, but you can run proofs. And then we have 3 projects that just started, which is Hyperledger Grid, that is focused on supply chain. It's using WebAssembly, which is a pretty interesting language. And then we have also 2 that are not on the slide because they are so new, which is Hyperledger Transact and Hyperledger Arias. Arias is focused on the protocols of identity mechanisms, while Transact is focused on the governance structure and off-chain communication tools. And then we have the tools. I won't bore you with all of them. I'm happy to answer some questions. 2 that I would want to highlight is Hyperledger Quilt, which is focused on interoperability, and Hyperledger Ursa, which is a shared cryptographic library with some very fun properties. And then if you're looking for a benchmarking platform, Hyperledger Caliper would be the one that you want to use. But to be honest, blockchain is just a technology. It is a very powerful tool, not a solution. And thus the applications are very wide and spanning across all sectors. And I like to underline that because quite often people are like, oh, we'll just put a blockchain in a thing and it'll work. It doesn't, because blockchain is just like AI or it's not like Google just put AI into their search engine and they built the most powerful search engine. They have many other elements that create this powerful search engine. Same with blockchain. So our goals is to create a very enterprise-grade software that is community-driven and promote our community of communities, tell the story of our members. So I still have a bit of time, so I'm going to give you like 2 or 3 use cases so that, you have an idea of what is part of Hyperledger, or what people are doing with Hyperledger. So we'll skip those slides. Here we go. So first is one that is quite famous. It's called, the company is called Everledger, and they have built a process of tracking diamonds to prove that they do not come from conflict zones. They now are building a similar use case for wine tracking and provenance of wine and quality assurance of wine. And there is another company called Circular, which has created a supply chain on rare metals. So what they are doing is they are proving the provenance of some of the most rare metals that are used for production of cars. And now their latest project is really cool. It's about batteries. All of the problems with batteries, car batteries that fail, or they are fake or something like that. So they are now working with one of the bigger car manufacturers to create that solution, which is also pretty exciting. Digital identity, I mentioned, this is a very big topic. There are several working live projects. One of them is done by the government of British Columbia. Do you know where British Columbia is? Anybody? Canada. So one of the provinces in Canada has implemented something that is called OrgBook, which is a method of tracking the registration of companies. So you can look up a company and make sure that it's a legal company and that you can transact or exchange information with it. The other identity project also on Hyperledger Indy is in Philippines, where the Bankers Association of Philippines is creating a KYC model because only 44% of Filipinos have bank accounts due to cumbersome process of know your client, so submitting all the documents. And one that I really like is about green assets management. This is incentivizing companies to track and prove carbon emission and making sure that they are encouraged to produce less carbon. This is done also on Hyperledger Fabric and in China. So that's how blockchain helping the world or sustainability. This one is really interesting. It's actually IP Chain is a Russian-based network it's a non-profit that develops standards, technologies, and tools for an effective collaboration between IP market participants. And one of my favorite projects from them is Ko-fi. That's the fourth here on the right-hand side. It's the first Russian crowd investing platform, which allows you to invest based on IP of various companies. So it actually creates assets based not only on what you own or how much you have in the bank, but on the potential of your company in terms of intellectual property, patents, and so on. So it encourages a very different type of investment, and also allows everybody to invest based on current size. So I mentioned working groups and special interest groups because I know that as you start your adventure with Hyperledger, and obviously you are interested because you came to this meetup, it might be very challenging to just jump in and start coding. And I'm sure some of you are coders, but most of you probably just want to learn. So we have technical working groups, which are focused more on certain aspects of blockchain technology, like architecture, identity, performance and scalability, and so on. And you can get engaged with any of them. I will share this presentation later on with you guys, and you can just click on those links, or you can simply go to our wiki.hyperledger.org, and you will find all of the list of those working groups. They are meet online, anybody can join them, you can just dial in and listen, you can read what is happening on the mailing list at the beginning, but it's really good to do it. On the other hand, if you are a specialist in some kind of a domain, like healthcare, telecom, trade finance, public sector, social impact, or supply chain, and now also capital markets, which launched just yesterday, special interest groups are focused on certain verticals, as you can see, certain industries. So for instance, healthcare working group, a special interest group, has a lot of doctors and nurses being on that group. They don't necessarily understand the technology, but they do understand what problems community has, so that we can kind of work with them to develop blockchain solutions for that special industry. So again, feel free to lurk in. Some of those groups are working on white papers, so you could contribute by working on some of the white papers, and this is a great place to also listen to presentations of people doing certain things in certain areas. As I mentioned, we have very good wiki, wiki.hyperledger.org, and website, hyperledger.org. Both of those have a lot of information. You can see here we have webinars, we have tutorials, trainings, publications, and all that stuff. Wiki will have more of the technical aspect of things. They'll have contributor guides if you want to contribute and so on. And we have 3 self-paced trainings. I highly recommend the 2 free ones. So Introduction to Hyperledger Technologies and Understanding its uses and implications. First one, the Understanding its uses and implications is a very high-level kind of blockchain course, while Introduction to Hyperledger Technologies goes both about blockchain, but also teaches you how to deploy on Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Sawtooth, and Hyperledger Iroha. So you can take them for free. They are on the open source platform called edX, and learn more. They are very good. And that's it from me. I welcome questions, and then I can just write it to me probably if you have questions. And I wish you very good collaboration, and I encourage you to discuss as we finish this this presentation, to discuss among each other what you expect from Hyperledger Meetup. What do you want to do during this meetup? Because you are the community now, and it's on you to decide what topics should be part of the meetup. Thank you.
Can we try the sound? Marta, can you hear us?
I think you should try closer.
Marta, can you hear us? Hello? Can you hear us now? Hello? Hello, we're trying our best. Hello? Not picking up any sound.
Yeah.
Let's try this.
So are there any questions or no? Because if there are no questions, I'm going to just leave it up to you.
Yes, do you have any questions? Okay. I don't know what happens if I. I'm trying to call Marta via WhatsApp. Maybe this will help us.
Hello?
Hello, hello, Marta. I think we.
Hi. Great, that's a great idea.
Hello, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
And was wondering, what is the benefit of the users who use Hyperledger compared with building their own blockchain or using other blockchains? What is good for the users?
Sure. Sure. So the first, I'll take this question as 2 parts. First of all is, why not your own blockchain? And the answer is simple, interoperability. If you build your own blockchain, first of all, building your own blockchain means that you are the only person, or maybe you and your company are the only people that actually looks at it, verifies it, and are able to design it. While if you take an open source code, it is very different. It's millions of people looking at it, working on it every day, because they are using the same code base as you are, and make sure that this is actually working and there are no bugs. So that's why not your own blockchain. And it also means that it will be, you will be able to collaborate with other people who implement other blockchain, similar solutions on the same blockchain base, right? So if I have a Hyperledger Fabric node and you have a Hyperledger Fabric node, it's easier for us to communicate than if you do your Georgia blockchain node and I do my Marta blockchain node. So this is the first reason. Now, why Hyperledger and not other? It really depends. We don't believe that there is one blockchain to rule them all. That's why we have this insane 14 projects approach. And we say that we are like a greenhouse, so anybody can come to us with their seed of idea and we will give it to the community, and the community wants to feed it and make it bloom to something beautiful, everybody will benefit from the fruits of that tree or that idea. So we think that there are a lot of blockchains out there that are really good. The way that I really like talking to someone who has been working on Hyperledger, and she said that she has a product of Hyperledger and said, you know, I evaluated the community. I looked at which community is most open and helpful, which code is most stable, and I decided to land on Hyperledger. In her case, it was Hyperledger Solid, because she thought that this is the most kind of mature technology. And if you want a public blockchain, I highly recommend Ethereum. I think it's a great, permissionless public setting. But in many cases, you don't want that, and that's why actually Ethereum Foundation has joined Hyperledger, because they say, guys, you are doing a great job with permission blockchains, and we are doing a great job with public blockchains. So let's work together to kind of have the collaboration. And there are more and more projects that do that, that have consortium setting for exchange of information, and that then for longevity of the information, they move to Ethereum code base.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Anyone? Again, okay.
I'm the same person that asked the question.
Yeah.
Another question is that my impression is that Hyperledger is something for non-profit, for governments, or established companies. Then, do you think what are the opportunities, business opportunities, or opportunities for entrepreneurs or small companies?
So I think that Hyperledger is a framework. So think of Hyperledger framework like when you bake a cake, you want to make a cake for your friend, and you go and you buy this pre-made sponge, right, the base of the cake, and then you cut it and you put filling in and jam and decorate it, and you're like, I made my own cake, although actually the basis of it was someone else's, right? But it's faster and it's better. And that's what Hyperledger framework. Engage your network. They don't define who participants are. You get to define them. But the governance model, so how the participants kind of interact with blockchain, do you have permission channels, what kind of consensus mechanism you're using, this is defined by the framework. So if you want, as an entrepreneur, you want to build a blockchain-based solution, the reason why you're using Hyperledger is because you are using the same framework as your peers on the network, big and small. The code is very stable, so you know that it won't die. Another reason why you should or consider using open source in general is that if 5 companies out of our 280 members now, say 30 decide that they don't want to work on Hyperledger Sawtooth or Hyperledger Indy, it doesn't matter, because there are the 250 other ones that will pick it up, right, and continue working on it. So it is depending on your use case and depending on what you want to do with blockchain, you will use a different Hyperledger framework or another framework. And the reason to do it is because it's free and it gives you very good access to people who are developing it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Martha. I'm trying to understand Hyperledger kind of high-level architecture, and from what I picked up today, the way I'm thinking of it, this is probably way too simplified, is it's kind of like Ethereum, but you've got read and write access management control laying on top. But is that kind of it, or is it like way more than that?
Well, it's a bit like saying that Ethereum is just like Bitcoin. It just uses smart contracts and something, right?
Yeah.
Blockchain as such is a technology that. Can you mute me? Because wait, I know.
Okay.
blockchain as basis, as the technology, predates Ethereum, predates Bitcoin. Blockchain is a method of sharing information across networks, of peer-to-peer network, where nobody owns the distributed ledger, nobody owns the data, and nobody controls it. Everybody can interact on equal basis. Now, if you layer on top of it Ethereum style blockchain with smart contracts and tokens and all of that stuff, or if you go with Hyperledger Fabric, which has permission chain code, permission channels, and uses Kafka's consensus mechanism and something, or if you use Bitcoin, which uses proof of work and mining for assurance of authenticity of data, these are kind of all equal. So it is all blockchain, it is all distributed ledger, so it's all blockchain because it uses consensus mechanism. It's all distributed ledger technology. For instance, you might have heard about Corda. So Corda is more of a distributed ledger than a blockchain because it doesn't have proper kind of properties of a blockchain like the right consensus mechanism and exchange of information and the lack of ownership. But that's all kind of the same level, right?
No.
Thank you.
I have a very small question about TPS, transaction per second. What is today's results?
So it depends on. Can you mute me?
I'm interested in transaction per second.
Yeah, but could you mute on the phone? Thank you. It's just that then I have a feedback and I can hear myself, and it's really hard to focus when you hear yourself with the delay. So transaction per second. That really, I highly recommend. We have a performance and scalability white paper on our wiki and our website as well. Please read it because this really well describes all the aspects of it. So, in general, any blockchain will have different TPS depending on your setting. And especially when it comes to permission blockchain, you could put all of your nodes into one room, one server, or the different servers in one room, and your TPS will be much higher than when you have to transact between nodes that are, or exchange information between nodes that are like across the globe, right? Because you have all kind of latencies and delays. So this is the first aspect of it. Now, Hyperledger Fabric has anywhere between above, I think, 1,500. Normally, 3,000 is like the rough estimate. There are Sawtooth has similarly very high networks. I can pull up the kind of the numbers here, but it doesn't really matter that much because, as I'm saying, there are a lot of aspects of system under test, as we call it, that focus on that impact the transaction per second in a permission blockchain setting. So it's not as obvious as with permissionless networks that are kind of massive. But in any case, it's always faster than permissionless.
And one more question.
Question. And what are the current issues or some challenges to achieve your goal? Is there technically or some commercially accept as the user anything?
So Hyperledger is the most widely adopted blockchain kind of Hyperledger projects across all projects. They are the most widely adopted for enterprise setting. So for the top blockchain platforms, and 27 of them were built on various Hyperledger frameworks, and then 20 were built on Ethereum. So we are by far, for enterprise grade software, we are by far the most widely adopted one. Now, what are the challenges? A ton, I can tell you that. But these are mostly focused on the kind of building your network, building participants, finding a way to support people to collaborate with each other. Because everybody wants to build their own blockchain implementation and their consortium, and then have everybody else join it. And then, if you have, like, imagine Facebook building their network saying, now join me all in my network. And then Microsoft stands up and says, well, Facebook, why should I join your network? You join my network if you want to talk to me. So it's a matter of, like, human thinking, that people don't trust that it's a blockchain, so it doesn't matter who build it out the first, you should all join if you want to interact with each other. They all kind of have that mindset of, oh, I want to own it, although you don't own anything there, right? It's nobody's work. So this is one thing. Internally in Hyperledger, one of our bigger problems or challenges is contributions. Because it's an open source platform, we only can develop as fast as we have contributions from the open source community. We don't have developers on staff and so on. And a lot of time companies will download the code, will use it, will build products on it, but they don't actually give back. They don't actually, fix bugs in the code. So in an ideal world, I would have, 2-3 million developers working on the code basis, and we're nowhere near 1 million even, right? So this is my hope that we will get there someday.